In the 22nd century, Earth is on the brink of environmental collapse, overdeveloped and overcrowded. Since it's impossible to reverse the damage, scientists launch Project Terra Nova, which sends people 85 million years back in time to begin civilization anew, hoping for a better outcome. While they wait for their turn, the people in the city are forced to wear special masks to cope with the polluted air and live under strict military-style law enforcement. A new rule permits families to only have 2 children, but Jim and Elizabeth secretly have 3: Josh, Maddie, and Zoe. One day, Maddie rushes into their apartment, warning the family that she saw the population police in the building. When they hear a knock at the door, Elizabeth quickly hides Zoe in an air vent. The police enter and begin tearing apart the apartment, but they fail to find anything. As they prepare to leave, a frightened Zoe cries out. An officer opens the vent and grabs Zoe, which causes Jim to lose control and attack the cops. The officers quickly overpower him, and Jim is sent to a maximum security prison for 8 years. 2 years later, Elizabeth visits Jim in prison to tell him she has been chosen to join the 10th pilgrimage to Terra Nova, but she cannot take Zoe with her. Before leaving, she gives Jim a mask, as the prison air is making him sick. Inside the mask, Jim finds a hidden laser cutter, which he uses to escape. On his way downtown via train, Jim removes the police tracker from under his skin. When he reaches his destination, he finds a bag Elizabeth left for him, containing a fake ID, a gun, and a large sum of money. At the time portal station, Maddie, Josh, and Elizabeth pass the security check. Jim sneaks in by hiding under a car, and his ID also passes the check. He then pays an employee to get him to the second special bag Elizabeth left for him. As Jim mingles with the crowd, security spots him on camera. When he finally locates his family, he swaps bags with Elizabeth. Just as the guards grab him for interrogation, Jim waits until his family crosses the portal before reacting. He elbows a guard in the face, steals a gun, and rushes into the gate. In an instant, Jim arrives in the past with the other travelers. Soldiers immediately surround him, attempting to cut into his bag, suspecting it holds weapons. Jim quickly knocks one soldier out while Elizabeth checks the bag, revealing Zoe wearing a mask. The travelers are then taken to the colony, where they are greeted by Commander Taylor. The colony is in desperate need of a doctor, and since Elizabeth is one, Taylor allows her to keep all 3 children. Jim, whose only experience is as a cop, is assigned to agricultural duties. The family is provided with a house, and while they are settling in, they realize Zoe has wandered off. They find her outside, happily feeding some dinosaurs. The creatures accidentally lift her into the air, but she falls back to the ground unhurt. The next day, Josh meets Sky, who shows him a hole in the gate. They sneak out of the colony and go swimming in a waterfall. There they discover mysterious rocks with golden symbols, and Sky asks Josh to keep the secret, as Taylor doesn't want people near this area. Meanwhile, at the clinic, Elizabeth checks on an unconscious thief named Carter, who was shot down. When the guard refers to him as a Sixer, Carter suddenly jumps up, holding a laser cutter to Elizabeth's throat. He uses her as a shield, forcing the guard to drop his weapon, which Carter then takes for himself. Carter leaves the clinic, and Jim notices his suspicious behavior. He chases Carter through the market and eventually tackles him. After the guards take Carter away, Taylor leads Jim to the waterfall and reveals that the Sixers are a splinter group from the 6th pilgrimage, with a hidden stockpile of weapons. Taylor also makes Jim part of Terra Nova's security force. Just then, they spot 2 cars approaching the colony and rush to their own car to give chase. The Sixers open fire, but it turns out they're fleeing from 2 massive dinosaurs. One dinosaur is taken down, but the other eats one of the Sixers. The second dinosaur attacks one of the cars, so Taylor jumps out to distract it while the vehicles enter the colony. Once everyone is safe, Jim helps Taylor into the colony, where the guards fire at the dinosaur to scare it away. Mira, the leader of the Sixers, offers meteoric iron in exchange for rescuing Carter. It turns out the Sixers control the quarry, so Taylor accepts the deal. After they leave, the Sixers are attacked by another dinosaur, forcing them to abandon a car. Josh's group hears the growling and tries to return, but they find their car's parts have been stolen by the Sixers. They discover the abandoned vehicle nearby, with blood next to it. Just then, the dinosaur appears and the teens rush into the car, where a wounded Sixer is hiding. They want to leave in the car, but the dinosaur has already destroyed the engine, so they are forced to wait. At the colony, worried parents realize their children are missing, and the guards organize a search. By nightfall, more dinosaurs appear and start attacking the car. The teens open fire with the Sixers' weapons, scaring the dinosaurs away. One of the teens thinks it's safe enough to run back to the colony, but she's attacked just a few steps from the car. She's barely alive when Taylor's team finds her. Soon after, another dinosaur attacks the teen's car, dragging a boy out by his leg. Josh and Sky emerge and open fire, but a second dinosaur knocks them down with its tail. Another teen tries to reach the previous car but is also attacked, so Josh runs to protect him. More dinosaurs surround Josh, but luckily, Taylor's team arrives and scares the beasts away with lasers. Josh manages to save his son just in time, and everyone returns to the colony safely. A few nights later, 3 soldiers leave the gates to gather supplies, but they are forced to stop the car when they get a flat tire. Suddenly, they're attacked. The next day, Taylor's team goes searching for the missing soldiers and finds their bodies, all dead with their faces covered in blood. The bodies are taken to the clinic, where Elizabeth determines that the men were attacked by something above. Jim finds a claw in one soldier's boot and gives it to Dr. Malcolm for testing. When Elizabeth returns home in the evening, she tells Jim that they've discovered a new predator species. She also admits she dated Malcolm before meeting Jim. Later, as the couple tries to be intimate, they hear a strange screeching outside. Jim and Josh investigate and find flying reptiles. Josh throws a rock at them, which enrages the creatures and makes them attack. The 2 men receive a few scratches before they manage to return to the house, and the animals fly away. The next morning, Malcolm confirms that the scratches match the scars on the dead soldiers. Soon, the creatures fly over the colony, attacking the residents. Everyone runs for cover, but fortunately, nobody dies, though many are injured. The creatures eventually fly away, and the locals are unsure what scared them off. The soldiers manage to shoot one of the creatures down, and Malcolm retrieves the body for study. He theorizes that the creatures are migrating from another region, a theory confirmed when a scanner finds thousands of these creatures in the forest. Taylor remembers that during the colony's construction, they found eggshells in the ground, which made the land fertile. This suggests that the creatures are attacking because this is their breeding ground. To solve the problem, they need 2 living specimens to study. Jim heads out with a team and successfully captures the necessary creatures. After studying them, Malcolm and Elizabeth discover that the creatures produce a powerful pheromone that could lure them away from the colony to another location, where they can breed safely. In the evening, thousands of flying creatures attack the colony. Since the scientists are still working on the pheromone, everyone is forced to hide in their homes. The creatures soon break into Jim's house through the vents and knock out Maddie's crush, Mark. Josh, Maddie, and Sky quickly move his body into another room, but realize they forgot Zoe, who is hiding under the furniture. Josh tries to save her, but the small dinosaurs block his path. Fortunately, he pushes them off and manages to save Zoe just in time, preventing her from being attacked. Once the pheromone is ready, Jim and Taylor apply it to the back of a car and spray it, successfully luring the creatures to a new location and getting rid of them. Later at Outpost 3, a scientist is playing with a green beetle. He follows it out of the building and encounters a dinosaur, which immediately devours him. Soon, Elizabeth, Taylor, and a soldier arrive to investigate after losing communication with the outpost. They find the gate open and the cables chewed. Inside, they discover notes saying, "Do not go outside and this is not a dream." Strange noises come from another room, and when they look inside, they find 2 people tied to tables before a woman blocks the window. She can't remember why she's there, only that she was running in the snow before arriving at the lab. In the lab, they find a video left by the dead scientist, who discusses the early stages of memory loss that he and his team, including himself, were experiencing. Elizabeth theorizes that some kind of experiment went wrong, and Taylor announces that the outpost is under quarantine until they figure it out. Elizabeth begins analyzing the lab's contents, and after a phone call with Jim, she suddenly doesn't recognize Zoe. The next day, Jim is worried because they haven't heard from Outpost 3. The soldiers refuse to leave without Taylor's orders, so Jim asks Malcolm for his private vehicle. Malcolm agrees, but only if he can come along, and gives Jim a root to chew on since Jim is sneezing from a cold. When they arrive at the outpost, they find dinosaurs chewing on the wires, but the animals flee as soon as the lights turn on. The duo enters the lab, but Elizabeth shoots Jim with a sonic rifle. She doesn't recognize him, but recognizes Malcolm and hugs him. She believes she is still in medical school and has lost 20 years of her memory. Malcolm reviews Elizabeth's notes and discovers that there's a virus in the lab. Memory loss is the first symptom, and it ultimately leads to death. They find a video that Elizabeth recorded before losing her memory, where she describes additional symptoms. Just then, the power goes out, and Jim goes outside, thinking the dinosaurs are chewing the wires again. However, he hears a strange noise and sees a shadow run by. Jim follows the shadow inside, where he finds cut wires and an unconscious soldier. Suddenly, Taylor jumps on Jim and threatens to shoot him, having lost his memory as well. Believing he's still at war, Taylor asks Jim about his family before knocking him out. Inside the lab, Elizabeth and Malcolm analyze blood samples and discover that someone was experimenting with gene therapy. Malcolm tries to kiss Elizabeth, but Jim walks in and pulls him away. Jim tells them about Taylor, who has now disappeared, and Elizabeth finds it strange that Jim hasn't shown any symptoms. Malcolm helps Jim move the unconscious soldier, but midway through he loses his memories too. At that moment, a dinosaur appears behind them, and they hide behind a door. Jim breaks some wires as bait, and the dinosaur runs to chew on them. The men lock the creature up, but then Malcolm begins to panic, and Jim knocks him out with a punch. In the lab, Elizabeth finds on the computer that the experiments were conducted on a man with Alzheimer's. Jim sneezes and takes out the root Malcolm gave him. Elizabeth analyzes it, suspecting it might be the cure, but the test comes back negative. When Jim sneezes again, Elizabeth realizes that it's the cold keeping the mutated virus at bay, so she kisses him to pass the cold to her. At the colony, Josh and Sky share a kiss, but Jim admits he still thinks about the girlfriend he left behind in the future. Sky then introduces Josh to Tom, who can bring people and items from the future for the right price. Josh doesn't have any money, but Tom is interested in earning the trust of a cop's son. Soon after, Taylor arrives at the gate, mistakenly thinking the colony is an enemy territory, and brings down a guard. Maddie is concerned about her parents, so Mark takes her to Lieutenant Washington's office to ask about them. Suddenly, Taylor emerges and takes Mark hostage, though he recognizes Washington. Taylor repeatedly asks about his family, and Washington is forced to remind him that his wife is dead. Overcome by the tragic news, Taylor attempts to take his own life, but Washington stops him by shooting him with a sonic rifle. The next morning, Taylor wakes up with his memories restored, thanks to a vaccine created by Elizabeth. Everyone is recovering and feeling better. Meanwhile, Tom is secretly meeting with the Sixers, revealing that he spies for them. He asks Mira to bring Josh's girlfriend, planning to use her to manipulate Josh and gain leverage over him. A few nights later, the gate guards notice something unusual moving in the jungle and go to investigate. After chasing it for a while, they discover it's a little girl named Leah. She's brought to the clinic, where she causes a commotion by breaking things, but Elizabeth eventually manages to calm her down. Leah explains that her parents are dead and that she wants to return to the future to live with her grandmother. However, the adults inform her that the portal only works one way. Leah is terrified of Taylor because Mira told her he was a bad man, so Elizabeth decides to let her stay with Taylor's family. Suspecting Leah might be a spy, Washington and several soldiers go into the jungle to find Leah's backpack. They're ambushed by the Sixers, and although Washington puts up a strong fight, they are eventually overpowered and captured. The Sixers take their prisoners to the colony, where Mira attempts to trade them for Leah. However, Leah wants to remain in Terra Nova, so Mira releases the soldiers, and the Sixers leave without Leah. Later, a couple reports a break-in at their house, where a hidden compartment under the floor has been exposed and emptied. Washington remembers that this house once belonged to Mira, and Jim decides they must find Leah. The group rushes to the gate and catches her before she can escape. It turns out Leah had been tasked with retrieving a mysterious container from the compartment and delivering it to Mira, who threatened to harm Leah's brother if she didn't comply. Leah doesn't know how to open the container, and no one can open it by force. Taylor is skeptical of the brother's story and orders the guards to detain Leah for the time being. Later at home, Jim discovers a note from Leah that reads, "I'm sorry. He interprets this as confirmation of the story about her brother. Determined to help, Jim sets out to find the boy. However, when he enters the jungle, he falls into a rope trap set by the Sixers and accidentally drops his gun. A dinosaur appears and attempts to attack him, but the Sixers intervene and shoot it down. Jim is knocked out and taken to their camp, where Mira reveals that Leah's brother was never in any real danger. She fabricated the story to manipulate Leah into cooperating. Mira also warns that Taylor has angered some very powerful people from the future who want him gone. These people have Mira's daughter, and she's working under their orders to protect her. Mira refuses to name these individuals and sends Jim back with Leah's brother. While the siblings are reunited, Jim keeps the truth of his encounter with Mira to himself. A few nights later, a soldier checks on a communication station, only to be attacked and killed by a dinosaur when he opens the door. The next morning, the team investigates, assuming it was a random attack by a wild creature. However, Jim notices scratch marks inside the building, suggesting it may have been a trap. The soldier's body is brought to the clinic, where Elizabeth finds blood from a herbivorous dinosaur. Jim speculates that it was used as bait to attract the predator, confirming that the death was not an accident, but a murder. Washington and Jim question the other soldiers and learn that the deceased soldier had been secretly seeing someone. When they search his belongings, they discover his identification tag is missing. The radar picks up movement, so the team ventures into the jungle to track the dinosaur that swallowed the tag. After a long pursuit, they manage to kill the creature and retrieve the tag from its stomach. Inside the tag is a selfie of the deceased soldier with a married woman. The team returns to the colony and interrogates the woman, who denies the affair. Just as the questioning intensifies, her husband arrives and admits he knew about the affair and killed the soldier in retaliation. The next day, Taylor announces that the murderer will be banished from the colony. The man is sent out to the jungle with only a weapon and a small pack. Moments later, Jim finds him, suspecting that the man lied to protect his wife. The man confesses the truth, so Jim sneaks him back into the colony, and they go to confront the wife. However, the woman insists she didn't kill the soldier. In fact, she broke up with him a few weeks ago because his gambling addiction, which he fueled by frequenting Tom's bar, became too much. Afterward, Washington and Jim investigate the soldier's financial records and discover that someone owed him a large sum of money. With proof of illegal gambling at Tom's bar, the soldiers arrest him. While searching the bar for clues, guard Curran informs them that Tom has escaped. Jim and Taylor follow Curran into the jungle, only to uncover that Tom is actually back at the colony. His arrest was a staged act. It turns out that Curran is the one who owed the soldier money and killed him to settle the debt. Curran denies the accusation and tries to shoot Taylor, but his weapon turns out to be uncharged. Taylor then beats Curran and finds the gambling records hidden in Curran's jacket, which he took while they were searching the bar. As punishment, Curran is banished to the jungle with no supplies. Meanwhile, Malcolm brings a rare dinosaur egg to the clinic. It hasn't hatched yet due to a defect, so Elizabeth performs surgery through the shell to fix the baby dinosaur's leg. The egg eventually hatches, and Zoe is allowed to keep the dinosaur as a pet. That evening, Tom gives Josh and Sky a map to meet with Mira. As the kids trek through the jungle, the Sixers surround them and cover their eyes to escort them to Mira. Mira admits she can send messages to the future and agrees to bring Josh's girlfriend in exchange for a big favor from Josh when the time comes. A few days later, a meteor appears in the sky, crashing to Earth and causing an electromagnetic pulse that fries the colony's electronics. A large fragment of the meteor strikes with such force that the shock waves severely damage the colony. The news of the blackout reaches Mira, who orders her men to help her bait a dinosaur. The massive beast shows up at the colony gates, ready to attack. Taylor and Jim fire flaming arrows to create a barrier of flames between the dinosaur and the colony. Just then, Taylor notices arrows sticking out of the dinosaur's back, signaling that it was meant as a distraction. They rush to the lab where they find Carter and two Sixers stealing a mysterious containment unit. A fight ensues, and while Jim and Taylor are distracted, Carter escapes with the containment unit. Jim gives chase but loses him in the dark. Tom witnesses this and heads to the lab to kill Carter and win Taylor's trust. The next morning, Tom fixes some microchips, restoring power to the colony. Later, Mira and Carter meet Lucas in the jungle to give him the containment unit. Lucas opens it and finds graphics that resemble markings near the waterfall. Lucas reveals that he's Taylor's son and says, now Dad will have to make a choice. A few days later, Tom tells Josh he must steal rare medicine from his mother's lab for Mira. However, first, Tom wants proof that the Sixers can really bring Josh's girlfriend. Tom takes Josh to a hideout where Mira uses a machine to allow Josh to speak to his girlfriend from the future. Near the beach, Jim and Taylor find an extinguished vampire dinosaur, and Taylor suspects it's Curran. He decides to investigate, following a trail of blood to find Curran with an injured leg. Curran reveals he's been chased by a Komodo dragon and is waiting for it to attack once he passes out. When the Komodo dragon finally appears, Taylor scares it off with a large blade in flames. Taylor tells Curran that to redeem himself, he must pretend to join the Sixers to discover the spy within the colony. That night, Josh steals his mother's ID, and Tom makes a copy. He also gives Josh a gun. Josh breaks into the clinic and attempts to use the fake ID to open a cabinet, but it doesn't work, forcing him to shoot the lock and take the medicine. The impact leaves bruises on his body. The next morning, Jim and Elizabeth investigate the break-in. Meanwhile, Josh worries that some patients may need the medicine, so he goes to the bar to take a bottle back. He tells Tom that his father is asking too many questions, prompting Tom to kill a drunkard at his bar to frame him. When the man arrives at the clinic, Elizabeth sees the bruises and confirms through a test that the man has used the stolen medicine recreationally. That evening, Josh decides to confess the truth to his parents, presenting the bottle as evidence. Jim immediately confronts Tom, who admits that Mira has a way of communicating with the future. When Jim informs Taylor of this, Taylor explains that the only person capable of creating such technology is his missing son. Tom refuses to say more, and Taylor locks him in a room with a loud siren. Days pass, and despite the torment, Tom remains silent. After Taylor leaves, a delirious Tom mistakenly believes Jim is Taylor and reveals that he will expose him by disclosing what's buried under the Pilgrim's tree. Jim heads to the lab, where Malcolm explains that the Pilgrim's tree is where Taylor stayed after first arriving at Terra Nova. Once Jim learns the location, he digs beneath the tree and uncovers a human skeleton. Jim brings it to Elizabeth, who notes that the body is missing its right arm, and a rib fracture suggests it was shot. Growing suspicious of Taylor, Jim asks Elizabeth to keep the skeleton's discovery a secret. Meanwhile, Mark and a security team are transporting supplies to Outpost 9 when they're ambushed by the Sixers. The Sixers steal all their supplies and send them back. Back at the colony, Maddie spots a giant dragonfly and knocks it down. A closer inspection of the dragonfly reveals a hidden microchip inside its body. Malcolm analyzes the chip and concludes that the dragonfly was being used as a carrier pigeon between Mira and the spy. Soon after, Mark's team returns and explains what happened. Washington notes that the mission wasn't planned until after Tom's arrest, meaning Tom couldn't be the spy. Taylor agrees and releases Tom. After conducting some tests, Elizabeth discovers that the skeleton doesn't belong to any traveler listed in the records. It must have arrived between the second and third pilgrimages, a time gap that shouldn't be possible. Jim confronts Tom, who shares his story. Tom was once a guard, and one night while on patrol, he heard a gunshot and found Taylor next to a body. He doesn't know whose skeleton it is, but Taylor kept repeating that the person came through the portal because Lucas made it happen. That was the last night anyone saw Lucas. Meanwhile, Malcolm discovers the skeleton and reports it to Taylor. Jim pretends to have found it thanks to an anonymous tip, but Taylor dismisses it as likely just a dead Sixer. He doesn't reprimand Elizabeth for withholding it, which strikes everyone as strange. Malcolm later heals the dragonfly, and Taylor releases it during the Harvest Festival, when the colony will be mostly empty. They follow it around and are shocked to see it stop at Jim's house. Meanwhile, the kids perform a play about Terra Nova's beginnings, and Jim notices that one of the founding generals is missing an arm. Before he can investigate further, Taylor finds him and arrests him. Jim is locked up, and Taylor offers to release him if he drops the investigation into the skeleton, but Jim refuses. Instead, he asks Taylor if he killed the general. Taylor admits to killing the general to prevent him from killing him first. He explains that the general was sent by the same people who sent the Sixers and doesn't believe in a new beginning. Their goal is to use Terra Nova's resources to make money in the future. Lucas was working for them too, And when Taylor destroyed Lucas's work, Lucas fled. Taylor eventually tracked him down, but when he found Lucas opening the portal for the general, Taylor killed the general first. However, he couldn't bring himself to kill his own son, and Lucas escaped. Understanding the situation, Jim is released as Taylor believes he isn't the spy. Sometime later, Taylor announces that he's going on a 24-hour quest and leaves Jim in charge. While exploring the area around the waterfall, Taylor finds more of Lucas's equations engraved into nearby rocks, along with signs of a campfire that suggests Lucas was there. Suddenly, Mira appears behind him, holding him at gunpoint. She reveals that Lucas is getting closer to creating a two-way time portal and ties Taylor up to take him with her. Taylor tries to escape, but Mira shoots him, though he manages to grab a dinosaur claw from the ground. As they continue to move, Taylor uses the claw to cut the ropes binding him and waits for a distraction to overpower Mira. Despite a good fight, Mira is eventually overpowered. Taylor takes her gun and forces her to accompany him, but something is following them. Moments later, two dinosaurs appear, and Taylor shoots at them before running with Mira. They reach the edge of the waterfall, and Taylor is left with no choice but to cut Mira's ropes. Both of them jump into the water to escape, managing to swim to safety but losing their guns in the process. Realizing the dinosaurs will soon find them, they agree to work together to survive. They build a bow, arrows, and a spear, lighting them on fire. When the first dinosaur approaches, they attack together, and the beast is driven off by the flames. The second dinosaur, seeing its companion's fate, decides to leave. Afterward, Taylor and Mira part ways. Back at the colony, guards in the watchtower spot a flashing light coming from the jungle. Jim deduces that the light is being used by the Sixers to communicate with a spy inside the colony. He orders Mark and another soldier to monitor any lights coming from within the colony's walls. Mark finds a flashing light coming from an unfinished housing development. They rush to the building but find no one inside. However, Skye is hiding nearby with a mirror in her hand and a wound. When she hears the soldiers, she runs away and makes it to the clinic, where she steals a healing spray to treat the wound. In the unfinished house, Jim finds a drop of blood in a can of paint sealant. He tries to collect it, but when he touches it, the blood disperses into the liquid, diluting it. Jim brings the sample to Malcolm, pestering him until he agrees to try to get a clean sample. Meanwhile, Skye arranges a meeting with the Sixers, but can't leave the colony due to heightened security. While watching Josh prepare for his work detail, Skye invites herself to join him. After arriving at the worksite, Skye tells Josh that she's going to check in with the foreman, but instead she sneaks off to meet the Sixers. They take her to their hideout, where she hands over the intel she's gathered in exchange for seeing her mother, who is very sick and only receives medicine if Skye delivers valuable information on time. Meanwhile, Malcolm manages to get a clean blood sample, which Jim brings to Elizabeth. The sample isn't very clear, so the DNA results won't be ready until the next day. Later that night, Skye sneaks into the clinic and destroys the blood sample. The next morning, Elizabeth and Jim discover the destroyed sample and realize that only someone working in the clinic could have accessed it, as there are no broken locks. Elizabeth tests the remnants of the sample and manages to gather enough data to confirm that the spy is a woman. When Taylor returns to the colony, he notices Skye acting strangely. Meanwhile, Zoe tries to hide her pet dinosaur because the adults plan to release it into the wild. However, she's caught, and her family takes her outside the gates to set the dinosaur free, where it is quickly adopted by a larger, adult dinosaur. Later, Taylor assigns guards to protect Terminus, the machine that will open the portal, as the 11th pilgrimage approaches. He doesn't want the Sixers to reach them first. Jim interrogates all the women working at the clinic, and Skye uses Josh as her alibi. She then asks Josh to cover for her, claiming that night she was taking some copper from maintenance for a personal project. After some hesitation, Josh agrees. That night, Skye sneaks out to visit her mother and is shocked to find Lucas there. He explains that he has discovered how to transport people from Terra Nova to the future, but it will take weeks to complete the final calculations. Lucas demands that Skye use the colony's supercomputer to speed up the process, threatening to kill her mother if she doesn't comply.